south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going? No, this is a... Are you f***ing kidding me? You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez.
And that was the last that anyone heard from Amber Tuccaro. A message that has a pretty interesting story in terms of how it even got recorded. We're going to cover that on today's case of BrainScratch. And I want to give a very big thank you to the many people that suggested this case. You know, I get a lot of suggestions, and sometimes several of you are suggesting the same case. That will sometimes nudge me to look into it. This is one that I've really wanted to get to for the past several weeks. Not that it's incredibly recent. She disappears back in 2010, but there are some pretty interesting recent developments that we're going to discuss here today as well. So with all that being said, let's jump into the case of Amber Tuccaro and see what we can learn together. Starting at edmontonsun.com, this is one of the earliest articles I could find on this case, and you're going to see a lot of reference to Project KARE. That is a unit based of Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers that are working together specifically to try to solve cases just like this one. So you might see that often in today's episode. Project KARE released disturbing mobile phone recording of missing Alberta woman. Project KARE investigators are asking for the public's help identifying a man who is heard in an emotionally disturbing audio recording related to the 2010 disappearance of Amber Alyssa Tuccaro. Investigators say the recording is from a phone call placed to Tuccaro's cell phone on August 18th, 2010, the day the 20-year-old woman disappeared when she caught a ride to Edmonton with an unknown man. Now, even the way that's phrased, caught a ride, I believe it's pretty well believed that she was hitchhiking at this point. She had flown into the local airport. She had a hotel that was by the airport. She was planning on getting to the city the following day, but apparently she was very excited to go to the city that night, and she did try to hitch a ride to Edmonton. During the 2-minute call, the unknown man repeatedly tells an unconvinced Tuccaro that they are traveling graveled back roads that connect to 50th Street in Edmonton. Tuccaro is heard asking the man to pull over before the audio becomes unintelligible. In the versions that I've heard, I'm not very clear that she is necessarily asking him to pull over. There's a lot of breakup that's happening on the phone. On the video clip that we just watched, if you do let that run to the end, you'll hear what I'm talking about. I'll have that in the description box below right at the top, so you can check that video out. That video is very important because honestly, it's one of the only means of identification we have for trying to find this guy that gave her a lift. And could very well possibly be the same person that is the main suspect in this case, especially when you consider the context of this conversation. She's saying she wants to be taken somewhere. He's saying he is taking her there. But if we look at where they actually traveled, here is Nisku, where she was staying in the hotel. And we can see she was trying to get to 50th Street up in Beaumont here. This is the airport that she came in at. And she is found way down here. And I know I said that a little early, but her body has been located. And as you can see, it is nowhere near where she was trying to go. It's pretty much in the exact opposite direction and way overshooting where she was trying to go. So let's continue back at Edmonton Sun. Tuccaro's mother, Vivian Tuccaro, she's also referred to as Tootsie in some things. So if you do research this case for yourself, you'll see either Vivian or Tootsie for her mom's name. She erupted into sobs as investigators played the recording for reporters. Quote, "We miss and love Amber so much. This is a parent's worst nightmare. Listen to the man's voice, and if you recognize him, call police. Please help us bring Amber home." And keep in mind, this is just an edit from a tape that is 17 minutes long, and only about 61 seconds, I believe, has been released publicly. So there's a lot of other information that was going on. For some reason, still to this day, and we're talking about 7 years after she disappeared, the full tape has not been released. There's even some mystery about how this tape was recorded in the first place. It looks like one of the news sources I've bumped into actually cracked that mystery, but police have not publicly commented to confirm that. but I think they pretty much have it solved. We'll get there. While police cannot say how or when they obtained the recording, they confirmed it was from a cell phone call placed to Tuccaro from a person she knew. That's another thing that frequently comes up in this story is people wonder, did she call someone or did someone call her? And according to Edmonton Sun, at least, they're saying that police are at least confirming that it was a call to her cell phone. Police have followed several tips and interviewed many people related to the case and now believe releasing the audio is their best opportunity to receive a break in the case. And there's something a little troubling about that for me personally. Even when you have video, it's sometimes very hard for that to produce a good result. And in this case, we don't even have video. We talk about the Delphi murders where the little girls were smart enough to snap a couple pictures and get some audio recording of the main suspect in that case. And it's just a very hard thing. Voices can be similar. You can have numerous people that sound the same. So if this is their best opportunity to receive a break in the case, this is a very tough case to crack. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to be sure to cover it with all of you and share it with you guys. And don't just shut off this episode now if you think, well, I don't live in this area they're talking about. I'm not even in Canada. My suspicions are this guy might not be living in Canada necessarily, or might not be native to Canada. For me personally, when I listen to that tape, I hear an accent that I hear a lot here in America, or in the United States of America. Sorry, Canadians. I know we're both in North America, but it sounds to me like it is an accent from the U.S. and maybe not an accent necessarily from Canada. I'm a little bit familiar with both. I have a lot of friends. I've been to Canada. I live in Minnesota and we go to Wisconsin, and sometimes those accents can be somewhat confusing with some Canadian accents. But for me personally, when I listen to that tape, the way that guy's speaking, I don't necessarily hear a Canadian accent. So it could be that the main break in this case could come from somewhere else where we're just totally not expecting, maybe the US, maybe even somewhere else. At this point, we're looking for, I think, people to overhear something from someone. I've got this friend that worked in that area. He keeps talking about this weird thing that happened back in 2010. Possibly I am a girlfriend or a spouse of a man that has a career where he drives to other places, or it's regional work and he travels a lot, and he keeps talking about strange things that happen. There's going to be some piece out there that I'm hoping, if this is the suspect, that, and like I said, I think it's a pretty strong notion that he is indeed the suspect. Hopefully at some point he gets loose lips and drops a little bit of information into the right ears, someone that has a big enough heart to care and to actually phone that information in. And if you happen to be watching this video, the contact information is down below. I've got the police number down there, and also Crime Stoppers, where you can submit that tip anonymously if it is someone that's close to you, or if you're worried about retaliation of any kind. So if you are out there, please do the right thing. Please call in the information on this case. But let's continue. We're now going to jump over to ammsa.com, the Alberta's Aboriginal news publication. Missing persons investigation turns into suspicious death. On September 1st, and this is of 2012 at this point, Tuccaro's remains were found in a field by horseback riders 12 kilometers east of Leduc. Her death has been deemed suspicious. She was 20, and once again, just so you can see, the area is known as Raleigh View, so that's what I have marked on the map here, but Leduc County is basically a bit of a large section right around that. Tuccaro was reported missing August 20th, 2010, 2 days after she accepted a ride with an unknown man. Her destination was Edmonton. She was last seen in the early evening hours on August 18th in Leduc County. Another reason why we talk about these stories and we cover this stuff on this channel is so that we hopefully learn from cases like this. Hitchhiking in a place you're really not familiar with. Hitchhiking in any place can be extremely dangerous, especially for a young woman. And she is a mother. She has a 14-month-old at this point that is staying with her friend in the hotel that is close to the airport. There are just so many reasons that she had for not risking her life in this way, but maybe some of us out here can learn from this experience as well. Tuccaro was staying at the Nisku Place Hotel with her son and a friend after flying into Edmonton International Airport from Fort McMurray on August 17th for a medical appointment. And I know a lot of people question why she was in the area. This is the only little piece of an explanation that I've been able to find on this. We don't know what the medical appointment was for. Tuccaro's remains were discovered only days after Project KARE released a telephone conversation between Tuccaro and an unidentified third party. In that conversation, the voice of the male driver of the vehicle she was in could be heard. The driver remains a person of interest and not a suspect. Of course, they did find her remains. I don't know that they really understand or have a solid cause of death in this. So could it be that this guy was just a jerk and he dropped her off in the complete opposite direction and then something else happened to her? Very slight possibility that that could be the case. I think what we're looking at here is likely going to turn out to be the suspect if he can ever be identified, but we'll have to see if that comes about. Jumping over to HuffingtonPost.ca, just to get a few more details on what's going on with this case. RCMP say dental records were used to identify the remains as belonging to Amber Tuccaro of Fort McMurray. RCMP say the circumstances surrounding her death are suspicious and a ground search of the area is underway. This is back in 2012, November 4th of 2012, so just after she had been found. So we know that she traveled to this area for a medical appointment, but she went out and hitched this ride in the evening. I don't think that her appointment was probably scheduled around then. Here we finally get a little bit of information about what her motivation might have been for trying to hitch that ride into Edmonton. She left Jacob, her son, with her friend to meet with another friend of hers, and that was the last time she was seen. And that's coming from Staff Sergeant Gerard McNeil of Project KARE. So at least there we get a little bit of insight into why she left that night. But man, I wish she would have called that friend and asked for that friend to come pick her up. It seems so risky to be in an unfamiliar place like that. And that area where she was staying, the airport hotel area, there's not a lot of homes there. It is basically a bit of an industrial area, and there are hotels, and that's about it. So if this was some type of predator situation where someone was looking to take advantage of someone, that area is a very good area to do that, because more than likely this person is not living in that area, and they're knowing that other people in that area aren't going to always be wholly familiar with that area. In the 24 hours following the release of the audio on the Project KARE website, the link got more than 6,000 hits. Police also got a significant number of tips from it as well. And I did see a video clip that was speaking a little bit about when they released the audio, and there are at least 3, I've also heard 4, women that think that the audio sounds like one particular person. They called that tip in. And the investigators have told them they've checked that person and they don't believe that they're related to the case. And you might see that person's name pop up. I've been hearing people complain about that they're doing videos on this and that name keeps popping up in the comments. I've looked into that person myself. He certainly has a bit of intriguing history that could match him up for being this type of person. But if investigators have said they've checked him and he's clear, there's really nothing else that we can do to nudge them to recheck him or anything along those lines. So I ask, if you guys are watching this video, please don't pop that guy's name in the comment box. We do have to respect the privacy of others, especially when they're not named as a person of interest by the authorities. And for me personally, he's not popping up in any of these publications where I can tell you guys that, hey, there's this specific person of interest, here's his name. And YouTube has very tight rules about releasing private information like that. So please don't share his name, even if you do find it in the comments below. Like I said, I don't think it's really related to this case. If investigators are convinced of that, we have to take their word for it. Moving to another article at Edmonton Sun, this one from 2013. Amber Tuccaro loved to sing and told her mom that one day her face would be on billboards. On Tuesday, her mother, Vivian Tuccaro, wept while RCMP unveiled 2 billboards in Leduc County bearing Amber's face and a plea to help find the person who killed her. Vivian, her mother, has 4 sons, and Amber was her only daughter. She always carries her daughter's picture with her, as well as a picture of Amber's son, Jacob. Vivian said she had always told her daughter to stay on her cell phone. Quote, "I used to always tell Amber, if you go in a cab or if you're catching a ride, stay on your cell phone, even if you have to pretend, just so nothing will happen," she said. And her last phone call was on her cell phone, and then this happens to her. The roadside billboards were posted near the area where the remains were found and will be moved closer to Nisku in a month. And that is back in 2013. I've seen some other reports saying that the billboards didn't come up until 2015, but I'm finding articles that say it was 2013. So just a bit of different information floating around there. Over at cbc.ca, this is a Canadian news source, pretty big Canadian news source. Police released 61 seconds of audio, but CBC News has learned that the full audio recording is 17 minutes in length, which corresponds almost directly to the amount of time it would take to drive from the motel where Tuccaro was staying to the site where her body was found 2 years later. I also did the same search when I first brought up the Google map. Right now, I have that third location in there, so it doesn't show the time of the drive properly, but they're absolutely right. Google Maps nails it at 17 minutes from her hotel to where her body was found. RCMP now says this was the only time in Canadian history it released an audio recording to the public in a homicide investigation. And I've already kind of touched on why I think it's a very tough piece of evidence to get value out of. So I understand why they don't do that normally. But if you are going to release it, I don't know why they didn't release the whole thing. Maybe it had to do with this. Source of call revealed. RCMP have refused to disclose how they got the recording or who Tuccaro was speaking to on her cell phone. But CBC News has learned that the call to Amber came from her brother, who was being held in the Edmonton Remand Center at the time. So basically, her brother is in jail, decides to call her, and all of the calls from that jail are being recorded. As a matter of fact, this article says they started that earlier, just in 2010, which is really interesting because you've got kind of 2 very odd chance things that happen here to make this recording happen. First, that center began recording their calls just earlier that year in 2010. But second, the fact that her brother happened to call while she was on that drive, and if it was indeed a 17-minute drive, he nailed the whole time that she was in that vehicle being transported. Now, there is a lot of question, a lot of debate online, and I'm really not sure even which way I believe on this, but people are wondering, did he know that she was on the phone? Or was she recording the phone call knowing that someone, or not recording it, but was she having the phone call knowing there was someone on the other end that could hear what was going on? And I do get a sense when I'm listening to the phone call back, at least the piece that's been released, that she's repeating things that the driver is saying, like she wants to make sure that the person on the other end is hearing those details. But does that really answer if the driver knew she was on the phone or not? I think the best thing we can look at is just the advice that her mother had given her about always being on the phone if you were in a cab or getting a ride somewhere. So I suspect, and there's no way to really know at this point, that she was on the phone. She was probably holding it up to her head. That might be part of what tempers the person that's driving, maybe in terms of his responses to her, where he's basically just telling her the same thing over and over, and the thing that she wants to hear, that she's going to the street that she's trying to get to. It could be that things could have been a lot worse for her if she wasn't on the phone at that time, but that's just conjecture at this point. We really don't know for sure. Back to the article. It's unclear why it took 2 years after Tuccaro's disappearance for the recording to be released. In terms of that, if it's a process that they don't normally do, they don't normally release that type of information, I can understand why it might have taken that much time. And they were probably hoping that other aspects of their investigation were going to pan out. And when those things didn't, they're trying to figure out anything they can do to move this case forward, and that was the step that they took. So I don't know if it's so hard to understand why it took 2 years. The main question for me is, if we do really know the source of the phone call, if they're right that it was her brother, why not release the whole thing, at least at this point? Maybe there's some other indicators in there that someone could pick up on. I was really curious, just listening to the clips, if I could get a sense of the engine noise, because I don't think we even know what type of vehicle this is. Is this a commercial vehicle? Is this a commercial truck of some kind? Is this a pickup truck? Is this a car? We're really not sure. Now, I know from a lot of the video clips I've seen and a lot of the conversations I've seen people have, a lot of people are assuming it's a truck. I don't know where that information is necessarily coming from. Maybe they're hearing something in the audio that I'm not, but it could be that releasing the full tape at this point might be helpful to investigators in a way that they can't anticipate, but I'm not sure if they're going to hear that message. And a little more on KARE here. KARE investigates unsolved homicides and cases of vulnerable missing persons. And while the RCMP won't say how many cases KARE is investigating, CBC's Aboriginal unit has found at least 15 unsolved cases of Indigenous women who vanished or were murdered in and around the Edmonton area. Bit of an interesting thing for me was I tried to go to KARE's website today, and the website isn't active. As a matter of fact, just trying to find the source audio clip from the news channels that first distributed it, all those clips aren't working anymore. I'm not sure that this KARE group is even still active at this point. If they are, I don't know, maybe they need a webmaster or something, because their website, at least for me trying to get to it today, was not operational. So like I mentioned in that last article, the CBC's Aboriginal unit has detected at least 15 cases kind of near that area. Here we have an article kind of basically calling it out. Globalnews.ca reports more remains near Leduc identified. RCMP may be searching for a serial killer. That's something that comes up in this case frequently, so I just wanted to touch on that as well. This instance, which was reported on July 28th of 2015, human remains discovered on a rural property near Leduc have been identified as 27-year-old Corey Ottenbright. Ottenbright, a local sex trade worker, was confirmed through DNA analysis of a hair sample she voluntarily provided to the Project KARE's proactive street team in December of 2003 for the sole purpose of assisting police in the event she went missing. Now, first of all, I don't know how great ideas like that don't get propagated to other police departments. I really wish that there was some kind of brain trust for really good ideas for policing. And this, to me, is pretty amazing that she actually provided her own hair sample, that they had a proactive street team reaching out to sex workers saying, hey, if anything happens to you, we want to make sure that we know who you are and who we should report that to. Can we take some of your hair? It's really interesting to me to think about policing in that way, especially because a lot of what we review on this channel and what we hear in the media here, especially in the U.S., is very reactive actions as opposed to proactive actions. So, but back to these additional remains that were found. So April 28th of 2003, Katie Sylvia Ballantyne is last seen in Edmonton. Her remains were found near Leduc on July 7th of 2003. May 15th, 2004, Dolores Brower is last seen once again in Edmonton. Her remains were found on a rural property near Leduc on April 19th of 2015. She's the same one that was found with Corey Ottenbright. She was last seen also in Edmonton in 2004, actually the same month. Pretty interesting. Those two cases, if nothing else, just looking at the bare stats here, certainly seem like they could be related. You've got them reported missing just about 6 days apart from each other. They are found at the same time. I don't know if it's the exact same rural property that they're found on, but those seem very similar to me. And another thing struck me when I was looking at this, just looking at these ladies, is it just me, or do these two seem like they look very similar, and then these two seem like they could look similar as well? I know frequently when we talk about serial killers, they have a type, a specific type they look for. Could something like that be happening here? And then, of course, August 18th, 2010, Amber Tuccaro is last seen in Leduc. Her remains are found on a rural property near Leduc on September 1st of 2012. When we look at the disappearances here, I'm not 100% that Amber is part of this group, other than the fact that she seems to match the look of one of the other victims. Perhaps there are other victims that are in this time gap between 2004 and 2010 that just haven't been found yet. There could be more to this theory about a serial killer on this case. So I just wanted to share that with you guys as we look into this, because people do talk about this aspect of it. Back over to cbc.ca. Vivian Tuccaro is faced with her daughter Amber Tuccaro's death every minute of the day. Quote, "I am 56 years old now and raising a little boy that is so full of energy. He drives me crazy, but at the same time, he's my sanity. I mean, he is all that I have left of my baby," Vivian said while talking about her grandson and Amber's son, Jacob. "Just the way he looks at me sometimes, and the way he stands like his mommy, the way he says words, he says them the way Amber used to. Like Amber had a witty attitude, and that's what Jacob has," she said in between sobs. On March 20th, 2014, Vivian filed a complaint with the chair of the Commission for Public Complaints against the Leduc RCMP. The complaint says investigators downplayed Amber's disappearance and took her off the missing persons list after 1 month, despite no one seeing her. I can't believe that happened. I don't know what would have prompted her to be taken off the missing persons list like that, but as you're going to see here, there's some really bad fallout from that happening. Quote, "So it took me 1 month to get her back on the missing persons list. I got the runaround. They told me, call this number, call that number, and I ended up back in Leduc again. What's worse, Vivian is left to wonder if any of Amber's personal property the police collected could have been used as evidence. It was destroyed when she was taken off the missing persons list." I really don't understand how that happened. Just knowing that it was personal property belonging to Amber, shouldn't it have been returned to her family? Now, admittedly, thinking about these items, they were probably things that were left behind from Amber in her hotel room. I don't think that any property, at least from the story, the way that I've seen it, I don't think any of her property was found after she went missing. So I don't know how useful it would have been in terms of it being evidence, but if nothing else, shouldn't that stuff have been returned to the family instead of being destroyed? I'm kind of shocked at that. Vivian traveled to Ottawa in February 2015 for the first ever roundtable into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And if there is any beacon of light in this story, outside of the hope of finding who did this to Amber, it's this aspect that there is some dialogue happening related to this case, related to other cases that are like this. I know we've got people talking about the Highway of Tears. It seems like we have a real cultural problem that is going on. And I don't believe it's just in Canada, but Canada seems to at least be putting some resources together to talking about it, to putting, like the KARE group together to try to deal with cases like this. And now we're going to see that there are some further developments in terms of them looking at it as at kind of a national level. She and dozens of families across Canada met with premiers, representatives from 6 Aboriginal organizations and 2 federal cabinet ministers. There, she expressed her support for a federal inquiry into the issue. This is one of the things that just really lights me up, makes me feel good inside when I see families of victims in situations like this try to make the best out of what happened to their loved one. And it seems to me like her mother is really trying to do that in this case. She believes it could highlight the gaps that exist, especially in the area of reporting a missing person. Quote, "I guess being more caring and not just saying, oh, she will call. Anyway, she's probably just out partying. Like, have more respect and more compassion, Don't just treat her like she's nothing. I'm not just speaking for Amber, but for all the missing and murdered," she said. Now, did that inquiry ever happen? There's been some bumps in the road, and we're going to get there. But before that, jumping back to globalnews.ca, this is an article from March of 2014. RCMP acknowledge first stages of Amber Tuccaro investigation were mishandled. Once again, it just mentions that her mother has filed a complaint. Quote, "It is our belief that the Leduc RCMP have failed to perform an adequate investigation into the disappearance and subsequent death of my daughter," she said. "We have more questions than we do answers, and it's been 4 years since she's been missing and 2 years since her remains were located, and we're nowhere near satisfied with this investigation." A spokesperson with the RCMP says that they are aware of the complaint but are unable to speak to specifics. However, Sergeant Josie Valaquette adds the RCMP, quote, "recognizes initial elements of the investigation were mishandled." They have to admit that, just in terms of the fact that Amber was taken off the missing persons list and then it took a month to put her back on it. I mean, that's a little bit of a fumble. That's a little too hard to ignore. So what else happened around that, or what other things weren't checked or looked into because of that? I mean, that could have a ripple effect. So it's going to be interesting to see if anyone really holds RCMP responsible for that kind of goof that happened there. Quote, "The RCMP Missing Persons Unit, along with new policies and procedures, were created because of the Amber Tuccaro file and other factors learned over the course of other investigations." So once again, at least we can see that this case is helping move some things in a good direction. And here, this is the most recent news. This is actually just from last week, November of 2017. This is one of Amber's brothers, Paul. Paul Tuccaro and his wife, Judy Cardinal, traveled thousands of kilometers to tell their story at the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry in Edmonton today. So yes, the national inquiry did happen, is still happening. I'm not going to go into all the details, but there were a couple of kind of stopgaps along the way. Amber's mother was pretty frustrated at some point. Even in this article, it talks about the fact that some things aren't going quite right in terms of how this process is moving forward, but at least they're talking about it. At least they're being able to present their story. I know it's tough when you're working in these kind of giant administrations like this. They can somewhat get impersonal with their policies and procedures, but hopefully Paul and his family are going to stick with this and keep driving this message, because I do believe that there are people that care enough out there, and hopefully they can make some more changes to cases like this, so maybe other families won't have to suffer in the same way. While it's been 5 years since Amber's remains were found on a farmer's field outside of Leduc, it still hasn't sunk in that she's gone, he said. Quote, "We never have closure because there's so many unanswered questions. It's hard. I don't allow myself to feel anything." Tuccaro plans to read a letter from his mother to the commissioners when he testifies Tuesday. He will also present 3 recommendations that he hopes will make a difference in solving MMIWG cases. The MMIWG inquiry will hear testimony from 58 witnesses over 3 days until Thursday in Edmonton. The inquiry's final report is due at the end of next year, and I am just hoping and praying that there is some change that comes out of them collecting all this information, maybe some procedural changes, maybe some new types of systems for the RCMP to work with. There's too many of these stories, and I know here in the U.S. we have stories kind of like this too. There's an interesting dilemma in terms of investigating cases, particularly if they happen on reservations here in the U.S., because there's jurisdictional problems. But actually in both cases, it does seem like we're talking about a cultural problem with people not caring about these types of cases. And that just really, I mean, is that the type of world that we want to live in? Don't we care enough about our neighbors to want to help each other in moments like this? I don't know. I like to think that there are people out there that do, and I like to think that that's a bigger number than the people that don't. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this inquiry and to see if any changes really do develop. I'm really hopeful that there is. There is a group, Justice for Amber Tuccaro. It's a Facebook group. I will have a link to that in the description box below for you. Also, they do an event annually, the Amber Alyssa Tuccaro Memorial Round Dance. You can see footage of the last one that happened here. I've noticed that on the poster for it, they've got it dated 2014 to 2017. I hope they're not stopping it. I think it's just such a beautiful way to honor her and to show her family, and in particular her son, how the community cared about her. So I hope I'm reading that wrong. I hope that it isn't over, but in any case, you can check that out in the description box below as well. I did find this blog from Marnie Tunay. Sorry, let me make sure I try to get that right. And actually, I don't think her name's even written in here anywhere where I can really confirm that. But Marnie has posted here we go, Marnie Tunay. Okay. Marnie has posted some information, and she is suggesting that in the same tape that we played part of, and you can listen to the whole thing, that she's hearing that there are two men actually in the car with Amber, two distinct male voices on that tape. I've listened to that tape several times now. I don't get that sense. I get that it's one guy. His inflection seems to be changing from certain phrases to other, but I don't know that I necessarily think that there are two men in the vehicle with her. If there was, I'm pretty sure, especially with the way that she's repeating information about where they're supposed to be going, and she's repeating the fact that she doesn't believe that he's taking her there and that he better not take her somewhere she doesn't want to go. I think she would have been smart enough to note into the phone that there was two people there. As a matter of fact, now that I think about it, there's probably more information that the police haven't released. She might have even described the vehicle in some way, but I don't see anything coming out from them where they're looking for a specific vehicle type. So I'm not sure. I don't know. God, I wish I could hear the whole tape. But at least to the point of trying to determine if there's actually two distinct male voices here, I have another video clip. This was actually posted from Marnie Tunay. I want to say Turnay for some reason there. And this has an edit just of all the segments where the male is talking, all edited together. So let's check that out together here and see what you guys think.
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont. We're going to 50th Street. Absolutely. 50th Street. 50th Street. East. We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont. We're going to 50th Street. Absolutely. 50th Street. 50th Street. East.
What do you think, Brain Scratchers? Do you think there was possibly two men there? I don't know. I'm still hearing one guy when I'm listening to all those clips, but I wanted to share that with you so you can tell me what you think about it in the comments down below. Of course, if you have other sources of information, other insight into what you think happened here, let's talk about that in the comments. As usual, I ask that we please remain respectful. More and more often, the families are coming to these videos and reviewing the information here. So if you wouldn't say it in front of them, please don't put it in the comments here, because there's a very good chance that one of Amber's brothers, possibly her mother, possibly someday her son, could run into this information. And if any of those family members do, let me just express my heart is broken about this case. This is another one of those tough situations where you have a very young woman. Maybe she wasn't making the best decision that she could have been, but it certainly wasn't the type of decision that should be the last one that she made in her life. And the fact that she couldn't learn from this experience in some positive way really breaks my heart. And then on top of that, you've got her son growing up without his mother now, which is really, really tough. So my heart goes out to you guys, and I wish you all the best with this case. Hopefully we'll get to see some changes from all this hard work you're doing in terms of raising exposure and looking for changes in Canada with how these cases are handled. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me here on BrainScratch. I appreciate each and every one of you. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Come back on Monday to the Lord and Arts channel and spend some more time with me. I'll see you there.